It's Tuesday, so that means it's time for another top 10 video. This time we finish out the main classes in the player's handbook for Dungeons and Dragons, so it's the top 10 magic items for wizards. So if you want to see what I chose for those, stay tuned. Just to get a few things out of the way up front, as we do with all of these, we are avoiding all artifacts, all legendary items, and all consumable items, and we're avoiding all of the tomes and or manuals or the Ioun stones that are going to increase a ability score by 2 and then increase the max, because those are useful for basically any class. Yes, I understand Staff of the Magi and Robes of the Archmagi are the best items for wizards, or really any, specific arcane caster, but they're legendary, so they don't fit on the list. So let's get on to number 10. Number 10. Number 10 is Bracers of Defense. These attunement, rare magic items from the basic rules of the DMG just give you a +2 bonus to AC when you're not wearing armor or wearing a shield. Using mage armor does not count as wearing armor, so this is going to give you the benefits of what would be a regular shield while using mage armor, which you will have access to. So that's going to boost your AC significantly, and with your ability to cast the shield spell, you'll be in a pretty good spot from most physical attacks. And as a wizard, you have a large breadth of spells. You can learn a ton through your spell book, and you can cast the ritual spells without having them prepared. So really, what you're going to need more often than not as the wizard is just a means of survivability, since you have access to so many different spells. Number 9. Number 9 are Illusionist Racers. We talked about these in the Warlock video. They were the number 1 there for a reason, mostly because Warlocks have access to the Eldritch Blast spell, but these very rare attunement magic items found in the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica book allow you to cast, when you cast a cantrip as an action, you can then cast the same cantrip again as a bonus action. Again, not as useful for your wizard, though 2 fire bolts could be very powerful in a given situation, 2 acid splashes. There's a lot of opportunities, especially given the type of wizard you're playing, where you may be able to get bonuses to damage type, like an evocation wizard, for example. 2 cantrips on a turn could be a very powerful thing, especially if you don't want to waste spell slots. If it's a weaker enemy or you're low on spell slots, it could go a long way. But again, I think it's more beneficial for a Warlock, which is why it's so low on this list versus being so high on their list. Number 8. Number 8 is the Belt of Dwarvenkind. You've seen this appear on a bunch of different lists. This rare attunement magic item found in the basic rules of the DMG is going to increase your Constitution score by 2 to a maximum of 20, giving you more hit points, making you more survivable. It's also going to give you advantage on persuasion checks made to interact with dwarves. Again, not super, I'm not going to say not super common, but potentially not a thing you're going to be doing too often. As the wizard, you may or may not be the party face. Your main focus is probably going to be on your intelligence score, but you may have a decent charisma and you may interact with a dwarf, so that's beneficial. You also get the lovely benefit of the increased chance to grow a beard every day, which may or may not be something you're interested in. But more importantly, if you're not a dwarf, it's going to give you advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to the poison damage type, dark vision out to a range of 60 feet, and the ability to speak, read, and write the dwarvish language. So that'll be pretty good. Again, if you are a race that doesn't have any of these benefits, this could be super useful to you. A human wizard now has dark vision. They have resistance to poison damage advantage on the saves. They have the charisma advantage to interacting with dwarves, plus the +2 bonus to Constitution. Again, you could put this on an elf, whatever the case may be. As long as you're not getting that poison resistance inborn from your given race, this is going to be a huge boon to you. And if you don't have dark vision on top of that, it'll go even further. So it's just something to help you make you a little more survivable. But I guess you could swap this with the Amulet of Health to just make your con score 19 if you'd rather go that route. Number 7. Number 7 is the Wand of Magic Missile. This uncommon non-attunement magic item is found in the basic rules or the DMG. Yes, you are a wizard. Yes, you have access to Magic Missile, but I've played plenty of wizards, and I never turned down a Wand of Magic Missile. It has 7 charges. You can use expend 1 charge to cast a first level magic missile. And for each charge above first, it increases the spell that you cast out of it by 1. It regains 1d6 plus 1 charges daily at dawn, and if you spend the last charge, roll a 20 on a 1, it is destroyed. Again, you have access to Magic Missile, and you may be casting it with your first level spell slots. In my mind, I'd rather save my first level spell slots for something like Absorb Elements or Shield to help keep myself alive, and use my Wand of Magic Missiles for casting Magic Missile. There's no reason you couldn't use the wand and cast it from a spell slot, and because the wand is non-attunement, there's no reason you couldn't stock up on multiple wands of Magic Missile if your DM will allow it, and then, have a bandolier of Magic Missile wands and just go to town slinging Magic Missiles like crazy without ever tapping into your spell slots. Again, Wand of Magic Missiles is a great item because it's non-attunement and anyone can use it, but if you can use this instead of a spell slot, I don't see the reason why you wouldn't take it. Number 6. Number 6 is the Cloak of Displacement. We've talked about this a bunch. This rare attunement magic item is found in the basic rules or the DMG. And basically, while you wear it, you project an illusion of yourself right next to yourself. So attack rolls made against you have disadvantage. Causing any creature to have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. If you take damage, that property ceases until the start of your next turn, at which point it reactivates. It also is suppressed while you're incapacitated, restrained, or otherwise unable to move. But again, as a wizard, you are squishy. Not that sorcerers and other arcane classes aren't, but you have access to a lot of spells. So one of my opinion, your focus as a wizard is to stay alive so you can keep dealing damage or supporting your party. So between Shield, Absorb Elements, Mage Armor, possibly Bracers of Defense, the Mirror Image spell, you have a lot of different options for things you can do to make yourself hard to hit. But if you take all of those, stack all of those on, and then stack a Cloak of Displacement, making any attack against you at disadvantage, that will go even further to keep you more survivable. The only thing it doesn't help with is if you get hit with an AoE attack, like an enemy throws a fireball or something like that, because it stops working if you take damage. It does not specify if you take damage from a melee or from an attack roll. Whenever you take damage, it ceases. So that's how you got to be careful. Magic Missile will get around this AoE effects. So it does have its limitations, but if you combine everything I was just talking about with Cloak of Displacement, getting you damaged or hit is going to be very difficult. Number 5. Number 5 is the Blast Scepter. This very rare attunement magic item is found in the Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage Adventure Path. Speaking of being survivable, why don't we take some survivability and then add in a bunch of free damage? So the Blast Scepter, when you're attuned to it, you have resistance to fire and lightning damage, 2 very common types of damage. If you're a caster, chances are you may be fighting other casters. Not always, but it's going to provide you resistance to 2 very common damage types. And as an action, you can cast a Thunder Wave from it at 4th level with a set DC of 16 without expending a spell slot. That potentially means you don't need to take one of your spells known as Thunder Wave, spells in your spell book, but you may have it, and then if you get the Blast Scepter, you can just not prepare it that day, and then it sits in your spell book if you need it for later. But you could cast this every turn as an action without expending a spell slot. Again, it's Thunder Wave, so it's going to make a lot of noise. People are going to know you're there. But if you're just trying to deal consistent damage turn after turn, this is a good way to do it without tapping into your spell slots, or possibly using some of your spell slots for bonus actions or reactions and things like that. So this will keep you doing damage and leave your spell slots for other things. Number 4. Number 4 are spell gems. We've talked about these ad nauseum in the past few videos. They are attunement. Their attunement levels vary, and these are found in Out of the Abyss adventure. The main thing behind a spell gem is it lets you do a couple of different things. Any spell in a spell gem, when it's cast, you go through the motions of casting the spell first, and whenever a spell you cast does not happen, it is then cast into the gem. So if I'm going to cast Fireball, I go through the verbal, somatic, and material components of Fireball, and then I do all the motions, but nothing happens. It's stored in the gem. So then, if I go to use the gem later on to cast the spell, all those somatic, all those components were already input into the spell. So when I cast it from the gem, it requires no components. So on one base level, you can use this to cast a spell that is uncounterspellable because it requires no components to do so. Therefore, no one will know that you're casting the spell, so it can't be counterspelled. So that's one benefit. Cast a spell without the components, so that's nice. Additionally, if the spell has a requirement of 1 action or 1 minute or longer, whenever you cast it from the gem itself, again, it might take you 1 minute or longer, or an hour, or whatever it takes on your initial casting to store it in the gem, that's fine, but when you go to cast it out of it later, it only takes an action. As a wizard, you have tons of spells. You have tons of interesting utility spells and things like that that take longer than an action to cast. And if you take that time, you can force that into the spell gem and then cast it as an action later. This could be a good way to get some sort of mass movement spell for your party. This could be a way for you to cast a ritual spell into your spell gem at the time, having it not prepared, but then cast it as an action at a later time. So again, you're going to have access to a ton of ritual spells, and those are going to take longer to do when you cast them as a ritual. Put it in the gem. I mean, on the basic level, you could take Detect Magic, which will take you 10 minutes to cast as a ritual, or 10, and then cast it into the spell gem, take that time up front, but then use an action to cast it later out of the gem, and no one knows you're doing it, so you could have Detect Magic up with no one being aware. The only downside is there are levels to the gems, right? So they go from uncommon up to very rare. And potential downside, depending on how you look at it, as each gem has its own set DC and spell attack bonus, depending on what you put in there. Again, if you're casting utility spells that don't have to worry about save DCs or attack bonuses, that's fine. The other side of it is, if somebody else attunes to the gem, they can cast a spell into it, and then you can cast it later using that spell. But I think you can cast it if it's on your class's spell list. So potentially that's the kind of trade-off between that and the Ring of Spell Storing. Someone else, like if you didn't have a spell prepared that day that's on your spell list, someone else could cast it into the gem and you could use it later. And you can see how that could have some utility depending on how it works. But, the very rare ones here can only cast 5th or 6th level spells with a save DC of 17 and an attack bonus of +9 or +10. Depending on what magic items you have and what level you are when you get this spell, or these gems, you may have better save DCs or attack bonuses, so that may be a little bit of a trade-off. It is also only the maximum, whatever the spell gem is set for, this maximum spell level here, that is, in fact, as it states, the maximum. So if you have a Jade spell gem, which is maximum 5th level, you cannot cast multiple 1st level spells into it like a Ring of Spell Storing. You can cast one 5th level spell. You could cast a spell of less than 5th level, but you're kind of losing out on the levels above, if that makes sense. Like you could cast a shield into it if you really wanted to cast shield. Oh, you couldn't. Shield's a reaction to cast. So you could cast a chromatic orb into it at 1st level in your 5th level spell gem if you wanted to. But you'd have 4 essentially lost levels of spells. You could cast a lower level spell at a higher level, but the maximum is the maximum. I hope I explained that well, and it is also, once it's imbued with a spell, it can't be imbued again until the next dawn, so keep that in mind. It's not after a long rest, it's just the next dawn. Number 3. Number 3 is the Ring of Spell Storing. Again, we've talked about this already a little bit with the Spell Gem. This rare attunement magic item found in the basic rules of the DMG allows you to store up to 5 levels worth of spells in it at a time. Any creature can cast the spell into it of 1st to 5th level. So again, you could cast 5 1st level spells or 1 5th level spell into this. So basic in class, you have a lot of utility use for this. Again, you could store 5. The one I always go to is store 5 shield spells in your ring. That way, if you get into a fight, you can use the ring to cast shield from it a bunch of times to help protect you while still having all of your first level spell slots. Or what's probably more useful is you have so many different options for utility and damage and things like that as a wizard. Have a caster cast a healer rather cast a healing spell into the ring, or several healing spells into the ring. It doesn't say, it's not required to be an action or anything like that. It can be bonus action spells. And you can cast the spell stored in it. It has the slot, DC, and save of whoever casts the spell. So your cleric could cast 5 first-level healing word spells into this ring, and now you have a bonus action heal spell that you can choose to use on yourself, on an ally. However you want to work it out, it has a lot of beneficial uses. Again, like I said, the limit, it's pretty much limitless how you can use the Ring of Spell Storing, especially if you have multiple casting classes. People have access to a spell that you don't have access to, or vice versa. You can make a lot of use out of one of these. So that's why it's number 3 on this list. Number 2. Number 2, I'm sure surprising nobody, is the Staff of Power. It's been on all the arcane casters that can use it, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. So here we go. It's a very rare attunement magic item found in the basic rules or the DMG. Why is this here? Because it's going to give you more options for spell casting, let you cast more spells while prioritizing your existing spells. It's going to give you a +2 bonus to attack and damage rolls with it. God forbid you find yourself in a melee situation as a wizard. This is a magic quarterstaff you can hit people with. It's also going to give you a +2 bonus to your armor class, so that's going to help make you more survivable with everything we've already talked about. A +2 bonus to your saving throws, which is big because that +2 bonus will also go towards Constitution saving throws, which will help you maintain concentration on spells as needed, and to spell attack rolls. There's not a ton of spell attack rolls, spells, once you get past like 3rd level, but there are some, and this will also improve your cantrip damage, or your cantrip to hit rather. It regains 2d8 plus 4 charges daily at dawn, has 20 charges total. If you spend the last one, roll a 1, it loses. If you roll a 1, it loses everything except for it being a magic quarterstaff. If you roll a 20, you get extra charges back. You can choose to hit somebody with it, expend a charge, and deal a d6 extra force damage. Or you can use, which was really why we have it here, to expend charges to cast spells from it as an action. Cone of Cold for 5, Fireball at 5th level for 5, Globe of Invulnerability for 6, Hold Monster for 5, Levitate for 2, Lightning Bolt at 5th level for 5, Magic Missile for 1, Rite of Enfeeblement for 1, and Wall of Force for 5. Those are all very good spells. They all have their place. They all can be used in different ways. This allows you to possibly not prepare spells, even if you already have them in your spellbook. You can get by using just the staff for it. And then if you're really in a last-ditch effort, you can do the Retributive Strike where you break the staff, it explodes. There's a 50% chance you travel to a different plane of existence to avoid the damage. If you don't, you take force damage equal to 16 times the number of charges left. And then in a radius kind of around you, other allies or enemies will take the damage. If they're 10 feet away or closer, they take 8 times the number of charges in the staff. 11 to 20, it's 6 times. And 21 to 30 feet away, it's 4 times the charges. Again, that's the last ditch thing. You probably don't want to do that because this is a very rare magic item, and when are you going to find another one? But I'm sure there's scenarios where that'll be useful. Number 1. And lastly, number 1 on this list is the Rod of Absorption. Partially, this is number 1 because it is exceptionally useful, and we'll talk about it. But 2, I also wanted to be a little bit different. Our Warlocks, Sorcerers, and Wizards do have a lot of similar uses and similar roles in a party, and a lot of the items that are higher level for arcane casters go for all 3. So I wanted to be a little bit different. So this very rare attunement magic item is found in the basic rules or the DMG. And this is basically going to become either a super defensive tool or a magic battery or both. So what happens? This when a spell is cast at you, targeting only you, not an AoE, you can use your reaction to cause the rod to absorb the spell. The spell's effect is canceled, and the spell's energy, not the spell itself, is stored in the rod. The reason they say that is because let's say somebody casts a fireball at you, it doesn't store fireball in the spell, it stores the energy of fireball. So if they cast it at 3rd level, it stores 3 levels of spells in the rod. The energy has the same level as the spell when it was cast. The rod can absorb and store up to 50 levels of energy over its course of existence. The other reason I kind of wasn't sure about putting it on here is I guess in theory, this is a consumable item, sort of. It stores 50 levels worth of spells, so in a way it is consumable. Eventually it will be gone and you'll lose it, but I feel like it's got enough utility and usefulness throughout its lifetime that it kind of breaks that rule. Anyway, once it's absorbed 50 levels of energy, it can't absorb any more. So if you're targeted by a spell that the rod can't store, the rod has no effect on the spell. So for example, if the rod has stored 45 levels worth of spells and someone casts a 6 level or higher spell at you, you can't absorb it because that's above and beyond the 50 charge or 50 levels of spell energy. When you become attuned to the rod, you know how many levels it has in it and how many levels it currently has stored. But here's kind of the big kicker here. If you're a spellcaster holding the rod, you can convert energy stored in it into spell slots to cast spells you have prepared or know. Now there's a little bit of, and I'm not entirely sure, so I'll let you guys debate it in the comments below. Does a wizard's spellbook spells count as spells known? My interpretation is no. Spells known is for something like a bard, a ranger, or a sorcerer, where you have something listed as spells known. It says prepared, so I'd imagine that's the spells you have prepared per day. You could argue that a wizard knows the spells that are in their spell book, but I think the way it's written, it's supposed to be that clear definition of preparation versus spells known, not allowing the wizard to have those as spells known. But if that is the case, and it does mean that the wizard's spells in their spell book count for this, then that is even better for a wizard. You can create spell slots only of a level equal to or lower than your own spell slots, up to a maximum of 5th level, right? So you can't use these, generate higher level than 5th level spell slots with it. You can absorb higher than 5th level spells, so you could absorb a 9th level spell into the rod, creating 9 levels of energy, and then use it to cast a 5th level and a 4th level spell, or 9 first level spells, or however you want to do it. You can you use the stored levels in place of your slots, but otherwise cast the spell as normal. For example, you can use 3 levels stored in the rod as a 3rd level spell slot, what I just said. A newly found rod has 1d10 levels of spells stored in it already. A rod that can no longer absorb spell energy and has no energy remain becomes non-magical. So that's why I was saying it is kind of consumable, because eventually it will dissipate and will not be useful. So again, it has a ton of utility for every spellcaster, but I'm going to go with a wizard, and that because, one, you're going to have a ton of spell slots, and you have your whole spell book to use from, so you can swap out spells prepared and use this as your battery when needed. Again, if spells in a wizard's spell book count as spells known, and you say take the time to learn every wizard spell, then that means you could use this thing to cast any one of them as long as they're 5th level or lower. There's also nothing stopping you if you really wanted to. I think the best use for the Rod of Absorption is as a defensive tool. Someone's going to cast a spell at you specifically, whether it be a charm person, dominate person, whatever, or some other spell. You use the rod to absorb it, so therefore the spell takes no effect. You don't get any of the ill effects of the spell, but you get the spell's energy stored in your rod to convert into spell slots at a later point. And you can create, you cast the spell as normal, it states. So if they cast a action spell at you that you absorb, there's nothing saying that you can't use 1 level of spells from the rod as a reaction to cast shield. You cast the spells as the spells would be cast. It's just rather than spending a spell slot, it uses energy from the Rod of Absorption. So you can use it primarily as a defensive mechanism to prevent spells from targeting you. I will remind you that Counterspell is targeted at a creature. So for example, if you're casting a spell and someone goes to counterspell you, you can absorb the counterspell with the rod. That spell has no effect. The counterspell has no effect. Your spell goes off as normal, and you have minimum 3 charges stored in your Rod of Absorption. So there's that. There's also nothing stopping you from casting a spell and then using your reaction to absorb your own spell into the Rod of Absorption to make it, again, a spell battery for a later date. You could do that. I think it's, again, more beneficial to just have it as a backup for when someone's casting spells at you. But there's no reason that if you really wanted to and it was the end of the day and you had spell slots left, you couldn't just cast spells as an action or a bonus action and then use your reaction while holding the rod to absorb your own spell energy to just fill this rod all the way up for when you need it going forward. You could have 50 levels of energy stored in the spell, all put there by yourself to just use to fuel additional spells in the future. It's got a lot of utility. Other people in your party could cast spells. If someone in your party is going to do something stupid, they're going to ruin a moment that you're like, don't cast that spell, you could absorb their spell so nothing happens, and then you have the energy. Again, that'll cause contention in your party, but maybe it'll save the social encounter or whatever it is going forward. So that is the number 1 item I have for Wizards. Thank you guys so much for following along with me on this journey of the top 10 spells for all the classes in 5th edition. We have received the Artificer already from Eberron. We know that came out a couple weeks ago. So this coming Tuesday, December, 17th, I will be doing the Artificer, top 10 magic items for Artificer. That'll be interesting. And then on the 24th, Christmas Eve, will be the top 10 magic items for Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter class, because someone asked me to do that, so I'll do that as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and all of the new followers and subscribers and everything. I really do appreciate that. So if you haven't gotten a chance and you do like this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We just recently hit 10,000. We already broke past 11,000 subscribers here on YouTube. So that's awesome. I really do appreciate all that support, and I am very thankful for you guys. There will be a giveaway coming out soon for a 10,000 subscriber giveaway where I have a bunch of my friends in the gaming sphere sending me a bunch of their products to give away to you guys. So that'll be really cool. And I also do stream on Twitch. Twitch has been kind of funky lately because I've had to do a lot of late night stuff for work, overnight shifts and things as the end of the year draws closer. So I typically stream on every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening at around 9 or 10 p.m. to do world building on Mondays, gameplay on Tuesdays, and character building on Wednesdays. And my friend Celeste typically runs one-shots every other Sunday on the channel as well. And there may be some new programming coming in 2020, but I'll talk to that as we get closer towards the end of the year. So thank you guys. Links in the description for all of that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week with the Artificer.